Hello everybody and welcome back to yet another video on how they can fix blank in Warhammer 3. Today we're going over settlement/empire management. So first of all, before we get into this, I just want to state that these are my opinions, these are in no way facts. This is just how I would approach these specific problems with my own specific solutions. If you have any different solutions or even different problems, then be sure to leave them down in the comments below. If you're not familiar with the layout of these videos, I'm first of all going to lay out the problems and then go through them one by one, offering my solutions. So let's get to the problems. First problem is all buildings have linear trees, so the same base building will always result in the same final building at the max tier. It doesn't add a lot of variety to the game, and it's just kind of boring. Resources don't really do anything. Now this was mentioned in the diplomacy video, but I didn't really go into too much depth with suggestions, so I'll try to correct that here. There is also no such thing as settlement specialization. Older games had specialization that made settlements specialize in certain things such as military or trade or agriculture. These allowed the settlement to have a central focus rather than all of them being jacks of all trades. And finally, corruption. I did bring this up in the Beastmen rework video, but corruption sucks. It takes so long to get going, and then even once it is working, it doesn't do anything because it's so easy to avoid and just ignore. But first...
You there. You enjoy content but wish there was a way to berate the person you're watching? You wish you could see in real time the mental breakdown of a professional gamer? If so, then I have just the thing for you. Introducing COLONELDAMNEDERS live streams. With Kernel Streams, you get to see every play, even the ones you would rather you didn't. You get to see the highs,
you get your cheeks clapped,
and the lows.
Come on, man, how?
You get insights into the mind of a professional in the field of gaming.
Let me tell you, if you ever get the chance to go to Islands of Adventure and try butterbeer, it is absolutely horrific. It is the sweetest thing that I've ever drank. When I drank it, I thought my teeth were going to fall straight out.
You get witty comedy.
Did you know that hammerers do armor piercing because they actually just crush the armor into the person and use it as a weapon? I swear to God, if I get that comment any more times, I'm going to
engaging conversation. And of course, no stream would be complete without some love interests.
We all know that Henry Cavill, hot man, let's be honest. That man, he's attractive, so.
So, if you want to see all of this and so much more, then head on over to twitch.tv/ColonelDamneders. That's twitch.tv/ColonelDamneders, and follow the channel so that you never miss a stream. Kernel Streams happen twice a week on Thursday nights at 6:30 GMT and Sundays at 5 PM GMT, so be sure to clear your schedule because you don't want to miss a thing. One more time, that's twitch.tv/ColonelDamneders, or just click the first link in the description. I'll now return you to your regularly scheduled programming.
So now let's go through and offer my solutions to these problems, starting with buildings having linear trees. So the building system in 3 Kingdoms has buildings that go up in more than one tree. These options grant different bonuses depending on the building type, so it's either more gold or more resources, improving a certain type of unit recruited in that place more than another. So this sort of system would encourage you to travel around as you recruit rather than doing it all in one region, which would be more annoying on the one hand, but would mean that in the end you do actually get a better army for it. There are also different trees such as more flat income versus a percentage income improvement. There are way too many to list here, so I'll obviously be showing them on screen now, but a system like this just offers some variety when building up settlements. It means there don't need to be a million building options, and instead you can just have a couple of varieties of the same building. So for example, how many times have you taken a region and it has a duplicate building, be it a military building or a growth building or an income building, and you're just going to get rid of it? How much better would it be if you could keep both of those and specialize them differently later on down the line? You could also even pull garrisons into this system. So are you sick of having the same garrison and walls and towers in every single settlement? Pick one of 3 paths to focus on a particular area. So you can either have a very large and powerful army, you can have a super tough and difficult to attack wall, or you can have very powerful towers. And of course, picking one means you forfeit the other ones, and while we may end up just going for the same one every single time, at least it does bring some choice. Moving on to resources now. As I said, this was mentioned in the diplomacy video, but I didn't go into too much depth. Now the resources in the game do actually give bonuses outside of money and the resource to trade, obviously, but mostly it's just those 2 things. Food also isn't present here, whereas it is in a lot of older games, but to be honest, I don't really think it's worth adding food back, since A, it would complicate things, and B, like, what are undead factions going to eat?
Do you eat ass? Of course I do!
Now, I don't think a system like in Troy, where every resource is its own currency, would work. It's a bit complicated and it doesn't really add much in the form of enjoyment or strategy, so I think meeting in the middle somewhere between these 2 games is the best way to go. So my proposal for resources is to be a point-based system. What I mean by this is that the more you have of a certain resources, the better bonuses you get. Now this would require a new training overview screen so you can see exactly how many resources you have access to. So once you reach a certain amount of resources, either by buildings or by trade, you get bonuses. So for example, having access to 25 iron gives armor buffs to your units. Having lots of dyes brings public order, medicinal plants bring replenishments, and so on and so forth. Give every resource some bonuses and give you incentive to catch them all. You know it's your destiny, trade resource. Some have higher amounts needed for tiers than others, and this is based on the rarity of the resource. So wood you might need to get all the way up to 50 for the first tier, whereas gold you might only need 10 just because it's so much rarer. So obviously this amount is increased via the buildings that you build, but it's also increased via trading. Trade deals would need to be reworked so you can trade individual resources rather than just a flat trade agreement. This is kind of half pulling the system from Troy without making it so that the economy is relying on all of these resources and it's actually just this one mechanic here. So you can trade exactly what resources you need for exactly what resources you don't really need. So say you have a massive amount of wood but you don't have any iron, you can then go to someone who does have iron and trade them some wood. Now this would of course be affected by if they have a lot of wood and how rare wood is. So 1 iron might be worth 5 wood by default, and then if that faction has a lot of wood, then that 1 iron suddenly goes up to being worth 10 wood. So you could either choose to try and collect all the resources to get a little bit of bonuses, or you could go really hardcore into one to get the max bonuses for that specific resource. You can choose to pick them up however you want, and it just adds a lot more strategy and tactics to your trade and also your settlement expansion. Now, settlement specialization. As I mentioned, older games had specialization, specifically talking about Rome 2 here. So there are different specializations depending on the settlement size, location, and nearby resources. Each faction would of course have their own versions of each of these with differences, but generally these would be the options toned up and down for capitals and minor settlements respectively. So the first specialization is of course military. Provides unique building options for improved defenses such as better towers and walls. I'm not going to touch garrisons since I've already covered my idea for how to fix garrisons in my army video, which you can check out right here. Military would also have public order buffs due to the military presence, and obviously reductions in recruitment time and cost. A civil settlement would be more focused on income, trade, and general prosperity outside of war. It would grow faster, have a larger public order problem due to the population size, and have increased gold production for all buildings in the city and province-wide. Agriculture would of course be mainly focused on growth and increased gold from agriculture buildings. So this could be your farm resource buildings, as well as any generic farm buildings that the faction might have access to. And finally, markets. These would increase income from trade using resources in the province and just general income increases locally. Now this would be the option that you'd go for if you're just focused on making money and nothing else, so you'd have a lot of these in the central safe part of your empire. I think adding specializations such as these would make it so you actually have to make a choice when you upgrade your settlements. I mean, you could argue that it's nice now how I can go from an income-focused settlement to a completely military-focused settlement in the span of a couple of turns, but it isn't really realistic. And I know that arguing that something isn't realistic when you have a game where you have dwarves, elves, dragons, and talking lizards fighting on the same battlefield, I can suspend my disbelief for all those different races, but infrastructure changing that quickly, now that's just beyond the scope of my imagination. So now we come to our final problem, which is corruption. As I mentioned, I did mention this in the Beastmen rework video, but corruption sucks. It takes a long time to change, and even once it does, it's not extreme enough to do anything. It takes so long to change, and the effects are so weak that you really don't even have to think about it once you get to the end game. Now the main problems with corruption are as follows. The 4-way Tug of War is just stupid. There are 4 different types of corruption, and trying to get yours to the top is honestly just such a pain. The effects are too weak, so there's no motivation to counter it, and the effects take a long ass time to build up. Now, I don't personally think that corruption needs a new system, it just needs the same system with some massive reworks. Now, if you saw my Beastmen video, then you know that I gave them a totally unique corruption mechanic for them. Now, the problem with a unique corruption mechanic per faction is that you'll end up with so many bars on a settlement that it'll be completely overwhelming. So my settlement uses a single bar that fills up over time as corruption is present, and Untainted doesn't have the majority. So for this example, we'll do the vampire counts versus the Empire. So as the vampiric corruption is the majority, the bar is filling up. Once the bar reaches max, a very strong army will spawn full of elite units of this predominant corruption. These armies won't be weak and raid till they get stronger, they will spawn strong and immediately attack. This means that corruption is now an active threat if left unchecked, as it will cause massive trouble for you even if you have good public order. Now these armies will work kind of like the old discount horde armies from the Beastmen and the Greenskins, in the sense that they will be part of the faction that produced the corruption, but will act more or less on their own. Now once the settlements are attacked, if they are taken, the faction will be given the same post-battle option that they would any other time a settlement is taken. These armies will then garrison in the settlements for the next 5 turns or so before dissipating. This gives you time to get your actual army in there to defend your new lands. And then boom, you have reason to focus on corruption because it can help you in battle, and you have reason to defend against corruption because, oh boy, that stuff hurts. Now you may be wondering how the 4-way Tug of War gets worked out. Now unfortunately, despite my big brain thinking, I can't really think of a way to get rid of it without getting rid of corruption altogether. Fortunately, I think my new system makes it less of a headache. So the Tug of War exists, but this corruption bar only fills up with the predominant corruption. So that means if the vampire counts have 26%, but the rest only have 24.6666666666666666666666666666 recurring percent, then the bar will start to fill up, albeit slowly. This means that you can be in the Tug of War, but as long as you have the majority, you're in charge, just like politics. The speed of this bar filling up can be determined by the amount of corruption, more than the next best. So if there is 70% vampire and only 10% untainted, then it fills up very quickly. And just a note, by the way, these percentages are worked out using flat values, not these slow increases we have in the current game. But on the other hand, if the vampiric corruption is 26% and 24.666 untainted, then it will fill up very, very slowly. Set the max to say 100 and the fill rate to be enemy corruption minus friendly corruption per turn, and round it up to the nearest whole number. And this can be the same for emptying the bar if you get back into control. So you may be wondering what happens if, say, the Skaven corruption overtakes the vampiric corruption halfway through this bar filling up. This will cause the bar to start filling up with the Skaven corruption and start emptying of the vampire one. This means that if the vampires manage to pull it back after a couple of turns, they won't have lost all their hard work, but they will have lost just a little bit of ground. So it doesn't mean that you can, say, wait for the vampire count to get to 99% of that bar filled, then swoop in with your Skaven corruption and immediately spawn an army. No, you actually have to beat them out completely and fill up the bar completely on your own. And if you're playing as the defensive faction here, then the only way to completely empty the bar is to have the majority corruption share. That just about concludes everything, so thank you for watching this video on how they can fix empire management in Warhammer 3. If you enjoyed this video at any point, then do consider leaving it a like, it really does help out quite a lot. And if you want to see more videos like this, maybe click that subscribe button so you can stay up to date. After all, it is free. Thank you to all supporters of the channel, especially Kobe Said So and Nifty Norm for their amazing support of the Unclean Ones tier. If you want details on how to get onto this end screen page, then there is an explanation in the support section of the description. One more thank you for watching, and for now, I've been Kernel Damneders, and I will see you next turn.